What's going on? My name is Joe, and I practice talking on the internet, and this is going to be a little bit different than how I normally do these type of videos. Normally, I just hit record, and I air out my thoughts and then go about my day. What I'm going to do with this is going to be a little bit different. If you're currently looking at this in the present, I am on X doing a little call thing on one end of this. On the other end, I'm doing a recording for this to end up on YouTube. So the plan on this moving forward is that it's going to be kind of a one-part thing with potentially two parts. The first part is going to kind of just air out my thoughts about whatever the topic may be. And then depending on time and interest, and if people want to, I'll invite them on to kind of have whatever conversation they might have. So I don't know if this is something that might end up being in one parts or two parts, but this is essentially the pilot. So if you're listening to this as it's live, welcome. If you are watching this from YouTube, welcome. X, welcome, all that stuff. I might clean this up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to track things and follow along, but we'll see how this goes. So in the short of it, I was one of the many people, like a lot of people, millions of people, who watched the Veep debate. And to be honest with you, I wasn't exactly impressed. I just thought it was kind of just what most people are used to at this point when it comes to what they used to have, which were two people who are basically trying to make the argument that they don't actually agree with each other on a lot of things. But something that I thought was kind of, I don't know if the word is funny, I don't know if the word is interesting, but it's something that came up, and that is that there are a lot of people talking about how, like, man, I miss when debates were like this. I miss when debates were civil, and these are just two people just patching out disagreements, and all this type of stuff. And something that was sort of like appearing over and over when I was like sort of reading the discourse and comments on that was people appreciated how normal and someone said palatable JD Vance actually is, where basically they're trying to paint him as this evil MAGA monster who fucks couches and all this other stuff, but turns out he's just like anybody else. He's just a palatable politician. And I take a little concern in that. I'm not the biggest fan of, I don't think anybody should be the fan of palatable politicians. One of the things I think is very important for any political party to have are people like JD Vance, are people like Tim Walz, people who can appeal to some sense of normalcy within whatever the ideology is. I'll start with Kamala Harris, because I think she's a more easy one to explain, and then we can talk about JD Vance. Tim Walz is parading and trying to present himself as not the everyman, but just an ordinary guy. An ordinary guy who started his career as a teacher and then a coach, and then his greater call came from some particular moment in his civilian life that eventually led him into being a politician. And with that, because he's an ordinary guy, he still maintains his ordinariness. And because of his ordinariness, that makes him a palatable person to hear, speak, and articulate ideas and stuff like that. And I don't buy it. I just, to be quite frank, I don't buy it. I think that it's another example of the identity thing that's been bothering me throughout the campaign. But essentially you have a guy who started out in the House of Representatives for, what was it, over a decade. And then he became a governor. He said about and became a governor. I have no reason to believe that he maintained who he was and he's the same ordinary guy. I think he uses those appeals to his identity essentially as a way of shielding himself from being just another representative of, I hate using this word, but another representative of the empire, another representative of the status quo. Like, you don't walk into politics, especially at that level, at the federal level, and just like maintain who you are type of thing. I don't necessarily buy that. I think time and time, you might walk into politics having that. You might walk into it with like good intentions and whatever, whatever synonyms you want to use for good intentions. But by and large, I think it will gradually start tainting you and warping you into just being another representation of the status quo. But what he's really powerful for the Harris campaign is the ability for him to parade and present himself like he's an authentic guy. Because I think Vice President Harris has a authenticity problem. I think the way that she speaks and the way that she presents herself in a way is fairly inauthentic. And there's like sort of jokes that are coming out of that, like the whole idea that like in any conversation she has to remind the audience that she's was a member of the middle class, that type of thing. And and you can look at the interviews where, when you look at all of her sort of podcast appearances, they're all incredibly consistent when it comes to the things that she says, when it comes to the things that she talks about, when it comes to the things that she presents. And I think what Tim Walz brings to the table is a presentation that doesn't come off as scripted. So he has value within that. However, that value within that ability to present himself as a quote unquote ordinary individual, a quote unquote not every man, but just like a guy who had the calling, like I was alluding to earlier, that is palatable and digestible for people who are, I would argue, skeptical of Kamala Harris and her politics. Because she does have a level of emptiness when it comes to her policy, because she doesn't have to present policy to get votes. And that's a very like important part of her campaign, an important part of her strategy, where she doesn't have to articulate anything. She can allude to certain ideas, but without not needing to have substance. And there's a bunch of arguments as to why someone may do that. I don't necessarily care about those per se, but it's just a feature of her campaign. It's not a glitch. She's not policy empty because there's just not enough time. It's a genuine, explicit strategy where she does not want to articulate any policy because it might be a problem down the road when she has to fight back against the Republicans. Because when you start arguing policy, then you can't always use these guys are evil all the time argument. JD Vance. JD Vance is a little bit easier to understand. Donald Trump is crazy. He is a crazy, crazy old man saying crazy old man things, and he needs young people who are the reasonable ones in the room that are even presenting to be the reasonable ones, where it's like, okay, I know grandpa said something really out of the walls, like off the walls, but JD, can you geriatric translate that for us? I think that's the value of JD Vance, and that's a level of palatability where, I can't really stomach Donald Trump because he says a lot of mean things, but at least JD Vance is going to say it's smooth. He's going to say the mean thing or radical thing, as far as the right's concerned, or the extremist thing, in a very smooth way that's going to like make it very easy to go down, despite the fact that whatever he's giving you is going to kill you anyway. No different than whatever Donald Trump is going to give you was going to kill you anyway. It's just that for Trump, it's much more aggressive going down your throat. For JD Vance, it's very like smooth. It's like ginger ale. Maybe ginger ale's not the best example, but both of these individuals, Walz and Vance, are just not great people. They're just not great in unique ways relative to the parties that they represent. And the debate should have shown that. Like, one of the problems that the Harris campaign is going to have to deal with is that they want to present this idea that they are people who can work together. We can work with Republicans on things. We can go across the aisle and help people. And then you just watched in real time what that means. It means in practice that these parties don't really have that many distinctions from each other. At the end of the day, they're going to have to work with each other. And by working with each other, there's going to be certain features that are unique to this level of like Republican Democrat collaboration that you wouldn't find if it was just Democrats collaborating amongst themselves. But again, like not again, but the Democrat shill of the world will be like, well, that's just politics. That's what you have to do. You have to work with others to get things done. It's like, that's not necessarily the case. For instance, in Tim Walz's case, he was in a government trifecta. He was in a gubernatorial trifecta. There was no such thing as collaborating with Republicans in Minnesota. They just kind of exist. And it's like, hey, you're going to like just yell and shout and we're just going to do our thing. Okay. We're not really going to talk to you very often. It's a little bit similar to the trifecta that we have in Jersey. Republicans exist and that's the best that they can do right now. But yeah, so with that, because of how collaboration works in politics, at least at the federal level, collaboration between Democrats and Republicans means that Democrats are going to have to make a lot more concessions than Republicans. Because Republicans are basically saying that, like, I won't move. And they're just not going to move. And then Democrats have to move closer to them in order to get things done. And it is what it is at this point. Like, I don't agree with that level of governance. I don't agree with the idea of like needing to collaborate with them, with Republicans, needing to collaborate with Democrats, when they are so, or supposed to be so opposed to each other. You can't on one hand say that these people are evil and then on the other hand saying that we need to work together. It doesn't, like, you're gonna have to make that go in a way that makes sense. Most people, when they articulate that argument, I'm not buying it. But that is what it is. I think to kind of like make a little bit this thesis, what I'm trying to say a little bit more clear, palatable politicians are a symptom of a apathetic political environment. And this is desire to strap politics to some level of like respectability, politics, and normalcy. And the idea of like, oh, we're just ordinary people. And by being ordinary people, we need to function in a way that's like hospitable. We need to be nice to each other. We need to make sure that, hey, even if we have abhorrent views and we don't disagree at all, we can come together and hold hands and all that stuff. And I don't buy it. I think it's bullshit. But hey, it's a strategy. I think we should definitely be wary of the palatable politician. Like anytime you hear somebody like Tim Walz speak, or especially JD Vance speak, you should be worried because they will smooth talk their way through some garbage. And hopefully, if you're like me, you don't appreciate garbage in your food. With palatability, it kind of ties a little bit into like the second thing within this, which is the limitations of ideology and Project 2025. I'm going to kind of group these two things together in interest of time. But basically, Project 2025, there's not much you need to worry about. There's just not much at all. Now, I would probably hold a different position if I understood MAGA differently. I think MAGA only exists, and what we have as this modern manifestation of extremism on the right exists because of one man, and that's Donald Trump. Once he's out of the mix, I don't think he's going to have that much, we'll say, influence and long-scale sustainability. I don't think the MAGA movement is sustainable because I think it's built upon one man. And when you build a project upon one man, and this project I'm speaking to is like the MAGA movement, then it's not going to be a sustainable thing in the long run. it's like the reason why, like the Obama, the Obama's hope message, and Obama only, like, the politic is Obama. So it's going to be very hard to carry the torch of the future of a political party that's built upon one man. There's carryovers, obviously. Like, it seems to be that we want to the best of our ability, have every single carryover of the Obama administration that we can. But that's not, again, as Democrats are revealing, it's not a sustainable project. Sustaining your political party on Barack Obama and his legacy just does not work. And I think the MAGA folks can learn from that. Is like, you're going to have to figure out a political identity that's separate from Donald Trump fast, because that dude's old. And he's old, and he's the kind of old that will nosedive the minute they're out of the political spotlight. And insofar me saying that, I don't think Donald Trump has much time on this earth left. So those kind of like overly bombastic, overly like traveled men, they just die. Like, there's just kind of, they just do their thing, and the minute they get some time to like relax, the heart's just like, okay, I'm just gonna stop now, I'm good. But anyway, my point being is that I don't think MAGA is a sustainable movement, so they need to figure something else out. With Project 2025, there are not enough MAGA Republicans to fill every single position within Project 2025. I don't think there's that many people. I think what is more closer to being possible, which I think is something of concern, is that much like how Kamala Harris is very policy empty, which will allow, if you're being charitable, progressives to sort of like sneak their way into the administration. And then because Kamala Harris is very empty on policy, they have to fill her emptiness with policy. So they're going to be the people who run defense for her. They're going to be the people who articulate what these things are. And again, like, because Kamala Harris is policy empty and substance empty, she's going to rely on other people to articulate her arguments for her. So that, I think, is, if you are voting for Kamala Harris, that's going to be something that I think that, you know, that will be the argument to have, of like, hey, listen, like, she's not for black people. She's not for the working class. She's not for students. She's not for any of these things that you believe themselves to be. Like, you're projecting, like, her existence is being structured in a way where you can project yourself onto her and then believe that your projection is reality. And I don't really care about telling those people that they're wrong. I think that the argument to be had is like, okay, if you, like, those identities that are being projected onto her might allow for people who you actually believe can do these things, might end up in her administration to get things done. I think it's the most charitable thing that you would hope for in her situation. But with that being said, on the Trump end, there's not enough MAGA people to fill these things. There's not enough Trump loyalists to fill all these positions to run Project 2025 as it is to the T. So you're going to have particular politicians, in this case, particular Republicans, to fill those holes. And then you're going to have to hope that those particular Republicans are quiet in their navigation, where they can skirt through a Trump administration without being fired, reassigned, a difficult time in confirmation. You basically need to, if you are somebody who believes that Project 2025 is a clear danger to democracy and that Donald Trump is actually going to actualize this thing, you're going to have to present the argument of, okay, these are the people, the palatable politicians that are going to end up within this deeper apparatus. And those people, those palatable politicians, are not going to be the devout Trump loyalists and MAGA Republicans that we believe them to be. Like, J.D. Vance is not a Trump loyalist. He's not a MAGA Republican. He's just another status quo, capital R Republican. He just knows how to sort of like smooth his way through these things and discuss his ideas and articulate his arguments in a way that creates a level of distance. But he creates a level of distance from Donald Trump, and he also presents himself in a way that's not overtly distracting. So he can say all these things that he's been saying and not like take the eyes away from Donald Trump. So you're going to need people, if you do believe that Project 2025 is the way or the future of the country, you're going to need to find what upwards of like 5,500 people that have particularity within their politics that can fit cleanly into Project 2025, and then that's just their thing. Like, you're going to have to find the family rights guy. You're going to have to find the preserve religious integrity guy at the expense of religious minorities. You're going to have to find the parental rights people. And their particularity is going to have to be within that lane of what you want to do. And they can't veer off in any type of way. They can't have any type of insane controversy, etc. And other ideologies have this problem, right? I think the only one in America where you don't really have to work that hard to find successors and people who toe the line are unironically Democrats. I think you can find. I think we are at capacity when we're talking about liberals and Democrats. You don't have to look that far to find a black woman with a pretty dress and shitty anti-black politics. There's plenty of them in the Democratic Party. So like, and they will, and the DNC broadly will gladly pick those people out. The minute you get a black person who's talking a little bit too radical, you get a black person or a person of color that's a little too anti-Israel, a little too much against the idea of state identity as personhood. And it's like, maybe this thing's got to go, guys. It's like, well, hold on. We're just going to pick this black person out of our liberal framework, drop them in there, throw APAC money at them, and have them play ball. Like, there's a never ending supply of those type of people. And I don't necessarily think that Democrats have a problem finding those people who can toe their lines. I think other ideologies do. I think that if we want to be kind of honest, in the current state of affairs, I think you're more likely to find a liberal, a lowercase d Democrat than you are to find any other political leaning or political stance. I think America kind of defaults to create liberals. Even in red states, I think it's kind of your default is ending up being some vein of liberalism, like modern American liberalism, neoliberalism, I want to describe it. And then you just kind of live your life. Then anything that's like kind of counter to that, like we'll say a more right-leaning individual, we'll say like a libertarian, leftists, those types of individuals that just come to my head off the top right now, those individuals are very few and far between. So they're going to have a hard time actualizing power in a way that's very lockstep, because they're going to need to play the politics game a little bit differently because there's not that many numbers. Like liberals can defend themselves with other liberals. I don't think leftists can do that with other leftists, especially if you're a leftist trying to like go up the political ladder, because liberals broadly will try to bring you down. If you're a libertarian, have fun dealing with Republicans. That's why I think, for an example of Vivek Ramaswamy, he said it outright. He's a libertarian running on a Republican ticket because reasons. And I think that's smart, because you are functioning within the apparatus, because if you are functioning outside of that, you lose the monetary resources and you just become a very easy target for people. which is why I always said that he had value within like what Republicans are trying to do, but they don't like brown people. So he's kind of compromised the character select. Anyway, I say all that to say that if you believe that Project 2025 is this danger, you're going to have to articulate the argument that the palatable politicians, the palatable Republicans, are going to be the ones that are running Project 2025, and there aren't going to be that many overt MAGA Republicans. I think the idea that far-right extremist, election-denying, Bible in your schools, banning kneeling in the anthem folks, they're not going to be the ones that are going to populate the administration of the Trump, of like if Trump were to be president, or for any Republican president for that matter. They're, I think, a more reasonable thing to recognize that they're going to handpick palatable politicians that have a very particularness in their politics to run and navigate within the particular politic or particular plan within this broader, however many pages document. I think it's a more reasonable thing to think about. And then it's just understanding, okay, who are those people? And much like how it's beneficial for Kamala Harris to not articulate policy, it's also advantageous to not articulate who's going to be in your cabinet positions, because then you can't like target those people and like call out their vulnerabilities. But yeah, that's where we are. The debate was mid, and that's kind of it. It was just meh. I mean, JD Vance looked better than Tim Walz, but no one's looking at the ticket and thinking that the vice president means anything in their vote. So why do you think the shit was 90 minutes? But anyhow, that's all I got for now. Like I said, I'm going to be doing these now on X and on YouTube. So like this video that people are seeing, like the visual, is going to be on YouTube, and then the recording I think I'm going to keep up on X. We'll experiment and see how it works. But either way, I appreciate you coming through, and take care.